Hello. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the clinical breakout session. Do we have any people here? Let's see. What do we have? Panelists, attendees, 20? That's wonderful. I can't hear myself speaking. Am I coming through? It's okay? Okay, great. So the title of this session is Data Use in the Time of Screening and AI, Defining Consensus, Value, Context, and Responsibilities. So we have, I guess, an hour. I don't know if we're gonna need the whole hour, but or maybe we will. I wanted to think of this session in terms of if we were to build a database, a big database for that would be of great value for the lung cancer screening world community. Some of the components that we would think would be necessary for that, and many of the sessions today kind of relate to that. So I'm hoping people's voices are in. Jim, do you have any thoughts about before we start? Should people introduce themselves or anything like that, or just go forward? Well, Rowena is on the line. Rowena is taking notes and will be helping to prepare slides for tomorrow's presentation. So to start it off, then I had written up a few questions, and we're going to try to get feedback from the audience. I'm not sure. Does it work where they're going to be able to speak, or is each person able to talk, or are they going to send in comments? I'm sorry, I don't recall how that was going to work. I'm not sure. Well, if you can speak, yeah.
David, this is Liz. Yes, they can raise their hand in the feature there, and they'll be given the ability to talk live.
Okay.
Or they can send in questions in the chat below.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thanks, Liz. So let's just talk, sort of the dream of building this database. And I think some of the things that came up today in the conversation, I think were wonderful. Just from that opening, I don't know if those of you who were at the keynote talk, you could just see the potential value of this database where Catherine brought out, wouldn't it be wonderful? Catherine Schmitz brought out how wonderful it would be if we had a nomogram for muscle mass, or that we could start thinking about, and all of this could be obtained from CT scans. We could start defining states of health for people, and I think that's just one of probably a dozen examples that we could come up with for the value of this and the directions this could go. And you can imagine then thinking about normal values for different populations. So all of what we talked about today feed into this whole kind of combined concept. So I had written down a few questions that I was sort of thinking maybe we'd get some feedback from the audience for. And the first question was, what do we envision using big data for currently? And everything from lung cancer detection to general health. Is there something that we should focus on when you're thinking about the database? Should we be thinking, if we were dreaming of putting together a database for use in advancing lung cancer screening, should we be thinking about it in terms of lung cancer screening, or should we be thinking about this in terms of, all of the other possibilities that we're doing, which is cardiac disease, emphysema? I kind of think the answer to that is pretty obvious, in that we may as well make it as broad as possible, because I think, for all I know, the biggest value that'll come out of lung cancer screening may be, the idea that this is just going to become a general health evaluation. That's sort of my personal view on it, but just some thoughts if we're building this kind of a database. Anybody have any comments?
I think your question about how wide brush should we use in painting this big database as a forerunner that can potentially help that with that. And that is in the ILCAP, you have kind of tried to keep a lot of data on the people that have been participating in your screening research activities. You've now published, I think, over 300 articles using that database. And it may be worth some scrutiny of what you did there and what the yield was there relative to, you know, advice going forward in terms of how to put together this new assemblage of information.
Well, certainly ILCAP is one example of how we collected a multinational, multi-center database, and to an extent, you know, just as an aside comment, in the early years, most of what we wrote about was lung cancer screening related. As the years went by, Claudia, you're here. But if you looked at the distribution of papers as time went on, I suspect it started shifting more towards other things rather than, you know, size of the nodules, detection of nodules. We got into more and more secondary or tertiary, whatever. They may be more important, but most of the publications probably revolved around other things. Yeah. I don't know if any, oh, I guess they do hear you for this, right? Let me ask another question. Assuming the infrastructure exists for supporting the data, curating, monitoring, and releasing it, what are the challenges in using it and putting it together? I think this is a really important question. You know, there's a lot of data out there, and how do we get it, and how do we release it? And I think this is the kind of thing where, I don't know if Heather's on this call. I hope she is, because, you know, we've been giving a lot of thought to this. You know, LCAP did it in a particular way. We had everybody under an IRB, and all the patients from all of our 80 outside sites signed informed consents for each patient. But if we were to put together a larger database now and really start collecting resources from, you know, throughout the United States, considering, you know, different populations that we want to make sure are represented, how do we get this data? Heather, are you on? No, she was. She had planned on staying initially. I thought she was staying for this call.
No, she's not on.
Oh, okay. He's on the line now. So, Chuck, we're listening. If you're there, I don't think he's on this call. I'm pretty sure he'd be in the other call, Jim.
I think Chuck is here.
Okay. Well, I'll wait a few seconds and.
And Jim's mic is off.
Okay. Well, to me, this is one of the critical questions. And, you know, I have spoken, for example, with Mary Ellen Geiger about how Midrick is doing this. And, you know, they are they try to seek out institutions that have different populations so that they can get representative groups. But what's really been concerning me is, you know, every institution sort of has their own policy. You know, there's no sort of uniform way of collecting data. And there's each institution or each group you go to has a sort of a different policy for how they'll share the data and what restrictions they want to put on the data. And it kind of becomes a mishmash. You know, and I was, I think we'll follow this. I think perhaps one of the things to do is from this meeting is at least bring this point up as something that's of interest. And how do we reach out to all these sites? I mean, there are hundreds of sites now that are screening, and there's some wonderful, collections of data. How do we get our hands on that if we wanted to put something together? Midrick has made us a data use agreement template that they send, and sites agree to it. They modify it. They put restrictions on who can use the data. And I think that's something that if we were to try to build a big database to start exploring all of the areas we can have an impact in, we'd want to sort of be as open as possible. I guess that's the thing that I'm thinking of, and what are some of the challenges with developing that? So that is something we can follow up on.
Anita works with the Framework of Excellence institutions. And, I think you're up to 900 institutions that are following screening populations.
Is that all?
And Anita may have some thoughts.
It's a good number. I thought you're over 1,000, Anita.
You'll have to repeat the question. We do have a sizable amount of screening center within our program of our centers of excellence. I think it's over 800. I don't know if we're quite up to 900. And then we have around 50 of our continuum of care centers too, combined with.
Do you have a sense of what's in those sites beyond number of cases? What other things do you sort of track? Or do you track anything in these sites?
Angela Criswell is our director of that program. So she's going to have more data. We collect information from the screening centers programs that, so they'll complete an annual survey, but that's on an optional or volunteer basis. Yeah. So we are tracking and monitoring, and I know that they published a paper, Angela, and it was co-authored by a couple other staff too, regarding their findings through that survey process.
Well, I mean, the go-to centers of excellence and all of the sites that are enrolled, that's just a spectacular resource. If there's a dream of putting something like this together, and I've spoken actually with Lori about this before, the idea, and she's very interested in continuing the discussions, because how do we really leverage this to make something spectacular happen? Places are collecting data. You have 900 sites. You have to have hospitals, that are really representative of all the different communities, and to pull those in a thoughtful way so you get all the different populations. And we start, thinking about what's the most critical information to obtain beyond just the images, that sort of things. And I think the idea of pulling together one of these massive databases where we could do, I think, something kind of transformative. Jim mentions, what we did with LCAP. We have a database of over 250,000 scans in our database. And we're really only now starting to see the value where others are starting to use it and work with it. And I think there are just so many new questions that are coming up that people are going to want to try to answer it. And I think that going forward, the idea of building databases that have millions of participants in it. Yeah. There was an LCAP meeting about 10 years ago where we had somebody who's this is before this AI explosion started. And he said, you guys are talking about databases of a few thousand. And we thought, this is great. We have 10,000 or 20,000. He was saying, no, for AI, real AI, you need hundreds of thousands, millions of cases to really do it well. I thought he was nuts. Yeah. I thought this was insanity. I don't think it's insane anymore.
No, but one of the other places that I think is a really fertile potential site for such sustained contribution is the VAs. And I think we have a gentleman who is involved in the VA software development who's in the audience that may want to comment on the relevance of looking to the VA to be a source of information from their informatics they're putting together with their imaging. Drew.
Is Drew on the line?
Yeah.
So we'd be delighted. We'd be delighted to hear from Drew.
Let me ask a question. Part of the big hurdle with large databases like this, not so much the scans, it's the clinical information that goes with those scans.
Right.
And so when you say you have 30,000 scans, how many of those have histories, physicals, diagnostic workup, lab results, things of that nature?
Yeah, so you're talking, so for the LCAP database, we were very fortunate that Claudia had the idea early on of really collecting very detailed clinical history, annotating it. And so it's really very comprehensive.
That makes a difference.
Yeah. And we tried to introduce that into the VA also with the VA PALS LCAP system. And at least the sites are going to be used, the sites within VA that are going to be using it are going to be collecting almost identical data. So it would be very useful in that regard.
So we have the data dictionary, maybe the most important part of the VA PALS.
Oh, I'd like to raise a population health perspective on a database, and one of the very best population health sources for cancer is the SEER Medicare data, which links all of the Medicare beneficiaries in fee-for-service who show up in SEER. And this is beyond clinical data. Linking to Medicare research identifiable files means you have 9-digit zip codes. You've got race, ethnicity. You've got where the person lived each year they've been in Medicare. You have all of the drugs they've taken since joining Medicare, all of the office visits, diagnosis codes, procedures, lab tests. So this is, and then you can match people who have a procedure to people who haven't had the image.
I thought they were saying they had many missing.
So that's a different sort of maybe a step too far, but
no, I think that's a wonderful idea. The idea that we were linking, if we were to build this huge imaging database and link it, really have the links to Medicare, you know, that's fantastic.
Or commercial insurers. Obviously, there's more commercial insurers than Medicare, but that kind of density allows a much richer longitudinal view. Someone might have started screening 2 years ago, but you can get all their history for the last 10 years from the administrative data. Not likely to ever get that from electronic medical records in any of our lifetimes.
How far behind is Medicare when you're collecting data?
Currently, I'm working with 2020 data.
So it's within a year. 2 years.
Medicare Advantage encounter data has somewhat bigger lag, maybe a year longer. So you could get Medicare Advantage, you could get Medicare fee-for-service.
Yeah.
So,
David?
Yeah, Drew.
Sorry, my picture isn't displaying here. So Bruce, I really appreciate what you're saying. One of the things that is not very difficult in VA is to, I guess, crowdsource tens of thousands of
While we're waiting
LDCTs.
for him to ask
So
another question.
not only do we have the routers to pull all these DICOMs, we have hard drives and centers of innovation where these can be stored. So your proposal then to pull, standard health service research measures, as you know, is centrally stored within the VA's corporate data warehouse. And I was curious, did you ever get through to anyone to maybe start working with us in VA? I know that our VA PALS team in Nashville was happy to help kind of chaperone you in, since one of our teams actually has one of the deputy directors that manages the VA corporate data warehouse.
I would defer to Claudia on that and answering that on the connection to the VA. Drew was mentioning the VA database capabilities along the lines of the question David asked him, and my comment about a population health metric. So all of that is, and I forget the name of the VA database. Vinci, yeah.
But each VA is in charge of its own.
Are you speaking to Drew? I think you need to turn on your microphone, Claudia.
Closer to this, Claudia. Yeah.
So, Drew, can you hear me?
Claudia, yes.
Okay. So, I mean, the way I understand it, but Drew, you probably have better knowledge. Each VA owns its data, but it sends data to the corporate data warehouse. And certain of that data is collected in Vinci in Salt Lake City. And that's accessible under the correct, you have to get all the correct authorities in order to use it. But so that's from all of the VAs. Or you can ask for IRBs. So for example, San Maguayo has an IRB to collect data and to do research on the screening. So you can have individual IRBs or.
So I think that this string started a while ago where David was identifying the VA as an ideal spot for a population health kind of approach, and Drew picked that up, saying, "Yeah, this is classical health services research tagged with images."
Well, the VA in particular has an advantage that they have the Million Veterans program, so they potentially can link databases of not only images, but link that potentially with all of the other information that's available. The thing about the VA, and Drew, it would be, what we're talking about here is potentially building a large database and making it available to whoever wants to use it, including industry, for example. So that kind of like what's happening now with the NLST data, only a bit more comprehensive and more up to date. NLST just changed their policy. There was an announcement, I just saw it the other day, where it used to be that if you wanted to use the NLST data, you had to apply, you had to submit your proposal, they had to send you back an approval, you had to get IRB approval. Now it is just open. It's open for anyone. So they've really publicly released it. The type of database we're dreaming of, I think there's a lot of considerations there, as to whether or not we'd be able to do that. But can you imagine the VA in any way participating in a program like that, where we get, say, 300 framework sites to participate, take the LCAP data, take, whatever, and have X number of VA sites participating. Is that something that's even, dreamable about?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And so I guess, Bruce, maybe I wasn't clear with my question. So when I say our VA PALS team, I am referring specifically to Claudia et al. She's a co-PI of VA PALS. And there was kind of a little birdie that was informing me that a prior Undersecretary of Health had nominated you to come in and help. And I guess I was just waiting for you also to show up, but that never happened. So again, the resources, the technology, the will, the interest, it is all there. And there's no reason why we couldn't have a data set with 200, 300,000 LDCT scans, and then a large kind of corporate data warehouse repository of procedures and also other measures to look at outcomes.
Yeah.
I haven't received the invitation. Maybe
Oh,
Claudia
so you were
has.
not aware of this?
No.
I don't think so.
A very high-ranking official in the VA pinged me a while back if I knew you, and I gave the most resounding endorsement I could. Let me follow up a second time on this, because we would love to have you officially anointed by the VA Secretary or Undersecretary to come in and help.
Well, I'd love to help. I did step out of the room about an hour ago, so that maybe I missed it.
Not today.
Administration.
Oh yeah. Sick Bruce on the military. That's the perfect thought. That's okay, but that's really interesting, Drew. The idea that there could be some kind of collaboration, or where the VA and other major organizations could contribute data into a common database. Wow, that's pretty spectacular, actually. Let's see. The question of who would have access, you heard that in the session that I chaired. This is a very interesting issue. And Heather had brought up the ideas of patients' concerns about where the data is being used and how that's being handled. Sometimes institutions have concerns where they just say, you can use it for anything except industry. Industry can't have it. Other institutions are saying, whoever wants it, take it. And so I think that's the kind of thing that we would like to come up with, as broad a policy as we can, because ultimately, I think the major breakthroughs come in from industry. When they have access to data, they really can make things happen. And even, I'm not talking just big industry, I'm talking about the startup companies. Imagine how this would be a driver to get startup companies moving. They spend all their time trying to raise the funds to get, an image database. If they had this available to them, it would accelerate, in so many ways. So I think that's one of the more exciting possibilities of us doing this. And this is one of the dreams of MIDRC that Mary Ellen is hosting. And, I guess the question is there a role for other organizations to do this? Or
I just want to say that nobody understands how much data cleaning needs to be done on those and how time consuming that is. And that's what I spent the last 20 years doing for each and every paper and for each and every entry. So that has to be really factored in for them to be valuable.
Yeah, and I guess that is one of the main topics also, which I kind of was going to allude to. What's the most important thing to get? Is it the images? Is it the metadata? Is it the annotated images? What is it that really will, move things forward? Emanuela talked a little bit about the idea of a database that continually evolves, and you're continuing to collect data, which is ideal because in that way you're keeping up with technology. So you get a database that constantly collects data, and then theoretically you could constantly be doing things like updating normal values. But Claudia, is very good at reminding us about how much data cleaning needs to be done before you can really start doing things of value. So it's really this tremendous balance. On the other hand, Claudia, you know, the more careful you are on collecting it, the less cleaning you have to do.
Right. Then, I mean, then you have to put all your money up front and check on everything. But so we've evolved. So, for example, we didn't have the body mass index. And so then the problem is that you always have missing data for some of the key things, but at least we can use statistical techniques for missing data. But you do need to be updating both what you collect and how you collect.
Okay. Any thoughts about how this could be done? Who would do it? Separate organization? Should this be something that's done through NIH? Should this be done outside of NIH? Should we ask some of the other organizations to put together a consortium and partner up in putting together a major initiative to do this? It's just some of the things that I've been thinking about. You know, Prevent Cancer, Go-To Foundation. You know, they're already kind of involved in all of these things, and it seems that it's a logical extension that would dramatically accelerate the field. I think there would be nothing like this.
To Claudia's point, you got to figure out how many dollars it's going to take to do that. That's who's going to determine who can support it and who can't.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is, you know, I used to talk, for example, to Rick when Rick was back working as head of AI and CAD development at GE. And when they wanted to build a product, they would pay $1,000 per CT scan that had the information that they wanted. And, you know, and they'd collect, you know, a couple of hundred cases, and they'd pay a couple of $100,000 to get the database, and that's how they do it. You know, when we're talking about building something around lung cancer screening, you know, there are hundreds of institutions have, you know, we have an LCAP, hundreds of thousands of scans already. In a sense, the most important part of the data, you know, it exists already. So, and the infrastructure to, at least the computer infrastructure for managing, by and large, exists. It would not take much to manage, to change it. And, you know, that's not a major investment. The major investment, I think, is sort of coordinating. You know, people that oversee the coming in of the data, you know, contractual with all the sites, that kind of thing. You know?
David, just a thought. You mentioned NIH. I think there's other agencies outside of NIH that do this kind of work. That I think ARC, Agency for Healthcare Research Quality, is outside of NIH, under HHS. So the question is, do you view this as academic research or applied research? And I think we're at the point where this ought to be considered applied research.
Yeah, I like that thought a lot. I like that thought. National Library of Medicine is almost a consideration. They release data imaging databases also, where they house them. And that's, I assume, is outside.
But CMS, for example, or the Health and Human Services, there's a number of the administration of the CMS data goes through an organization called ResDac, which is housed at the University of Minnesota. So I think there's some really extensive experience on the administrative side and the applied side that might be worth considering.
So Medicare is involved directly with the University of Minnesota, you said? I mean, they housed and did a lot of the data for, I think, PLCO and many other large screening trials. Minnesota's been involved with handling the data. So they're quite expert at that. But I think these are all wonderful possibilities. Yeah, the idea of linking up somebody like Medicare with it, I think, is fantastic. Yeah. That's where I think the value comes, getting all of that data together. You know, you get drug data, events, hospitalizations, treatments, you get all of that. And that really starts to make this data set very valuable. I think that I've covered the topics that I wanted to cover today. Oh, measures of success. That was another topic about you know, Manuela brought it up. No, Heather brought it up for the giving of data. I really think that's an important topic. How do you judge the success of some of these efforts? And to an extent, it's, you know, how many publications come out of it. In this situation, you could look at how many products are developed, how useful the products are.
You can embed in the code of the programs everybody who's touched that program. So that if it's in any kind of digital images, you can embed those. But how you then use it to evaluate promotion?
Well, no, Heather had talked about, you know, for people giving their databases away and making them available for the public, they needed to get some credit for it in some way. And she was saying that that's an alternate method of getting credit by how the data is used by others. And it's an interesting thought. For this kind of database, how do...
Open source,
yeah.
Open source has a model for that. But each person who's touched that.
Yeah, but I'm saying I wanted to go, I think, a step further and say that, let's say we built this database, and let's say, you know, however it's managed, and now we should be able to track who's used it and what products were developed from it and what major publications came from it. Those, to me, would be the measures of success. You know, Jim Mulshine just published an article about the cell lines he did 30 years ago when he was at NIH with Adi Gazdar and John Minna, and they created a few hundred cell lines, and it turned out that literally hundreds of thousands of papers and have been, you know, citations from these cell lines that they created 30 years ago, and it's really been the most productive area in oncology. You know, certainly for lung cancer. The amount of useful information that came out of those cell lines that they created. He published an article on it just recently. And I think that's the kind of thing that if we were to build a database like this, we would want to track something like that to see just how beneficial it is. I guess the only other question we have is who would support something like this? Is this something, you know, that we would seek to get grants? Do we seek to get philanthropic donations? You know, I don't, you know, something like, I mean, we could scope out a cost, but I suspect it is not that big. You know, not that big, meaning, let's say $20 million, $10 million to get this up and running. You know, Midrick is up and running for $20 million. Well, it's only 2 years. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think those are some of the things that we would want to consider. We'd certainly have to scope out a cost, but I suspect this could be a consortium of groups that would want to be involved if we were to do this. You know, organizations like Prevent Cancer, maybe American ALA might be interested in being involved. Go-To Foundation. You know, I think these are all organizations that would be very supportive of something. Even groups like Kiba, for example, would want to be involved in something like this. So those are my thoughts for this topic. Does anybody in the audience have any further comments for us because otherwise we can end this a little early, and Rowena will put together all the slides for me and present this tomorrow. So if that's the case, then we're good. So any thoughts from anybody else, or we're good? I have one Q&A there. No. How can we participate in the VA corporate warehouse as a non-academic facility to develop AI for log nodule detection? Is there a point of contact that you can share? Drew, are you still there?
Yeah, I would just connect with your closest lung precision oncology program site. And I can send you the link to the website. If it's not intuitive, I'll also give you my email. And I think that the local relationships are very important to do that. Dr. Henschke, would you give any alternative recommendations?
Claudia is not.
That sounds good. I don't have any additional ones.
Okay.
And here is my email address. Just contact me directly if you need any help. Happy to be a guide.
Okay, then. So we'll see everybody tomorrow. We'll summarize this in the last session. And thanks everyone for hanging around for so long. See you tomorrow.